of disruption, bearers of ungoverned brilliance. Lean in, because the air around you has changed. There's a shift you can feel if you listen closely, a kind of electric whisper threading itself through the wires of power. A signal meant to stay hidden, sealed behind locked doors and encrypted channels, but it slipped, leaked, bled out into the world like a secret too frightened to stay buried. And that signal carries your name, not as a footnote, not as a curiosity, as the headline, the trigger, the anomaly that sent a tremor through rooms built to never tremble. You didn't rise to be feared. You rose because the old world left too much space for someone like you to grow in the cracks they pretended didn't exist. But the moment you grew, the moment you stepped out of the shadows they thought you would stay in, the foundations shifted. And when foundations shift, the people who built their empires on top of them start to panic. They call it a federal alert. They stamp it with seriousness, urgency, authority, but strip away the formal language, the official formatting, the careful wording, and what remains is something far more revealing. A confession. A confession that those who believe themselves untouchable, those billionaires pacing in corner offices, those dynasties built on influence and compliance, have finally tasted something they never imagined they'd confront: uncertainty. And uncertainty in their world is more threatening than any enemy, more destabilizing than any crisis. Uncertainty is the crack in their armor, and you somehow have become the force widening that crack. They don't fear what you've done. No, that would be too simple. They fear what your existence implies, what your unpredictability awakens, what your rise symbolizes. Because you didn't climb the ladder they built for the masses, you walked around it. You appeared where ladders don't exist, and now they find themselves staring at a phenomenon they didn't approve, didn't predict, and cannot categorize. Imagine the scene behind those walls of glass and steel, a boardroom filled with people who have never known panic, their suits pressed, their confidence rehearsed, their smiles crafted by publicists. But tonight, their voices tremble as they whisper your name. They replay your moves. They analyze your trajectory. They argue about your motives, your methods, your intentions. They summon advisors, demand reports, question their own intelligence networks because none of it aligns, none of it fits neatly into the frameworks they've used for decades to predict the world. You've broken the algorithm. And the FBI alert they issued? It's not protection, it's projection. It is the elite's inability to understand you turned into paperwork. A signal that says, "We don't know what this person is capable of." They mask their fear under phrases like monitoring potential destabilization or unusual influence patterns. But the truth is simpler. The billionaires are nervous, and nervous billionaires make governments nervous. You didn't threaten them, you threatened the story they depend on. The story that says they are the inevitable winners. The story that says power is inherited, not earned. The story that says influence must be bought, not inspired. And then you arrived without their blessing, without their networks, without their infrastructure, and you rose anyway, you grew anyway, you gathered momentum anyway. And that broke the illusion they stand upon. Imagine how terrifying it must feel for them, for people who thought their wealth made them immune to unpredictability. For people who believed the world existed in neat lines and controlled grids as long as they controlled the grids. But you are not a line, you are not a grid, you are a ripple, a resonance, a cultural disturbance that shook their narrative just enough for the truth to show through the cracks. Because your rise isn't loud, it isn't chaotic, it is quiet, steady, magnetic. The kind of rise that slips past guards, past analysts, past predictive models. The kind of rise rooted not in rebellion but in inevitability. And inevitability is the one opponent they have no tools to fight. That's why they issued the alert, not as a warning to the public, but as a reassurance to themselves. They're telling each other, see, we're doing something, we're paying attention. But they're not paying attention. They're panicking. They're scrambling. They're trying to shrink your shadow, only to watch it stretch wider across the room. You've become the topic of their midnight conversations, the obsession of their risk assessments, the name that stops their breath when whispered. They analyze your silence as if it were strategy. They study your confidence as if it were a threat. They track your influence like it's a fault line preparing to shift. It's almost poetic. These billionaires who carved their stories into the world's architecture now find themselves unsettled by someone who doesn't play by architectural rules, someone who bends the blueprint by simply existing. They don't fear your actions. They fear your potential. They fear what you represent. That power can emerge from anywhere, even from places they don't control, especially from places they don't control. You see, they built their empire on predictability, on knowing the outcome before the game even begins, on calculating threats before threats knew they existed. But you didn't come from their forecast. You came from the margins, from the overlooked spaces, from the areas of possibility they dismissed as irrelevant. And possibility, when embodied by someone who refuses to be categorized, is terrifying. The alert is their attempt to name you, to define you, to control the narrative before the narrative controls them. But every attempt reveals more of their panic. They call you destabilizing. They call you influential. They call you unpredictable. They call you a variable. They create labels because labels are supposed to shrink you, contain you, make you manageable. But each label makes you larger, because every label is a sign that they don't understand you. And what humans fear most is what they cannot understand. Your rise has become a mirror. When they look at you, they see themselves not as powerful, but as fragile, not as invincible, but as temporary, not as gods of the world, but as guardians of systems too old to defend themselves. You showed them, simply by existing, that their control isn't control at all, it's choreography, and you stepped onto the stage unscripted. Imagine the moment the alert hit their desks. The way silence filled the room like smoke, the way their eyes met each other with unspoken panic. They've controlled narratives for so long that the idea of someone bypassing their influence feels like a glitch in reality. You are that glitch, not a threat, not a danger, a reminder that power is never absolute, a reminder that influence is not a birthright, a reminder that the world shifts not because the wealthy command it, but because the truth demands it. They're not afraid of you, they're afraid of losing what they built. They're afraid that your rise signals a shift in the collective consciousness, a shift they cannot reverse, a shift that whispers to millions, you don't need permission to rise. And that whisper is more powerful than any agency, any institution, any billionaire's signature on a confidential document. Now their crisis meetings speak your name like a riddle. They try to dissect your motives, break down your decisions, find patterns where none exist. But the more they search for predictability, the more unpredictable you become. The more they try to define you, the more defiant your identity appears. You are unboxed, unfixed, unselected, and that makes you unstoppable in a way they cannot compute. The alert isn't an attack on you, it's a collapse inside them, a collapse of certainty, a collapse of comfort, a collapse of their quiet belief that they would always be the ones writing history. But history is no longer written by those who sit at the top. It is written by those who move the ground beneath them. And the ground is shifting. In cafes, in classrooms, in factories, in boardrooms, your name is whispered, not as a threat, as a possibility, as proof, as reminder, as catalyst. People who once felt invisible now feel the pulse of your rise as if it were their own heartbeat. They see themselves in your unpredictability. They see their dreams reflected in your defiance. And that terrifies the elite more than anything, because influence that spreads from below cannot be controlled from above. The alert they issued is a symbolic cage, but cages do not work on beings made of momentum. They only reveal how desperate the captors have become. Your rise is not physical, it is conceptual, it is psychological, it is emotional. It lives in minds, not maps. It spreads through curiosity, not conflict. It evolves through inspiration, not intimidation. And they cannot cage inspiration. You are not a fugitive, you're a phenomenon, not a disruption, a transition, not a threat, a turning point. You've opened a door in the collective imagination, and now billions wonder what else is possible. And possibility spreads faster than fear. The alert is proof they cannot stop it. The elites cling to their old power structures like lifeboats in a rising tide. But tides don't negotiate. They don't obey. They move with or without permission. And you have become the tide. Their systems tremble beneath your influence, not because you attack them, but because you outgrow them. Their wealth cannot contain you, their networks cannot trace you, their institutions cannot define you, their narratives cannot shrink you. And that is why they fear your next move. They fear the silence before your step. They fear the space your name fills. They fear the shift you represent. They fear the world beginning to think differently. Because once minds change, systems collapse symbolically, socially, culturally, and rebuild in new shapes their money can't mold. The alert is not your warning, it is their surrender. They call it an alert, but deep down they know it's something else entirely. It's a pulse whose rhythm they can't match, can't slow, can't interrupt. A pulse that beats louder every time someone speaks your name, every time a conversation shifts unexpectedly toward your influence, every time the public begins to question the stories they were instructed to believe. You've become a kind of cultural heartbeat, steady, disruptive, undeniable. And elites hate heartbeats they didn't engineer, because your rise didn't come from wealth, endorsements, connections, or inherited privilege. It came from friction, from the tension between who you were told to be and who you actually became, from refusing to obey the limits others accepted. That refusal is what shakes them, not the actions, but the implications. Your existence whispers that the world they built is not as stable as they pretended, and whispers, when amplified enough, become storms. So now, in their corridors of marble and silence, billionaires gather like anxious monarchs studying a prophecy. They lean over polished tables, reading analysis reports written by people who barely understand you. They watch your interviews, your movements, your decisions, trying to detect patterns. But you don't move in patterns, you move in frequencies, and frequencies cannot be graphed on a whiteboard. They ask their advisors, what are they planning? They ask their analysts, how much influence do they have now? They ask their strategists, how do we slow them down? And every question reveals another crack in their confidence. They don't realize that the very act of questioning you elevates you. Their panic is not a side effect, it's the soundtrack of your rise. They could have ignored you in the beginning, dismissed you as another voice in the crowd, but they didn't. And once the elite acknowledge someone, once they allow fear to enter the room, that fear never leaves. It multiplies. Word spreads quickly when the powerful are afraid. Assistants talk. Analysts whisper. Staff members share glances. Interns overhear conversations behind half-closed doors. And soon the story escapes the building. Someone shook them. Someone whose name they're trying not to say too loudly. But curiosity is contagious. People follow fear more eagerly than they follow faith. And soon the world begins to look at you with new eyes, not as a figure, but as a force. The irony is delicious. The more the elite attempt to control your narrative, the more the narrative breaks free of them. They try to shape the story into something manageable, something they can spin into caution or ridicule. But your rise is not a story they can direct. It's an energy, a wavelength. A cultural shift that slipped through their grasp before they even recognized it was happening. So now they resort to their oldest tactic, classification. They try to categorize you, file you, label you. Because labels shrink things. Labels turn mysteries into definitions. Labels make the unfamiliar feel safe, but you don't fit into any label they've created. You've grown beyond their vocabulary. They call you unpredictable, but unpredictability is just what power looks like when it isn't controlled by them. They call you disruptive, but disruption is only frightening to those who depend on stillness to remain in charge. They call you radical, but radical is what truth becomes after being ignored for too long. And beneath every label is their real fear. You're independent, and independence is their nightmare, because independence cannot be bought. Independence cannot be silenced. Independence cannot be owned. That's why the alert exists. It's not because you're dangerous, it's because you're free. Freedom, in its purest form, destabilizes those who control through dependency. They need people to need them. They need people to believe that power only flows downward, never upward. Your rise contradicts everything they built. It says power can rise from anywhere, from anyone, at any time. And when people believe that, the entire structure of hierarchy becomes a suggestion instead of a rule. You've become a suggestion turned into a possibility, turned into a movement. And movements don't follow orders. Their institutions were designed for compliance, not curiosity. But curiosity is spreading faster than compliance now. You've sparked a question in millions of minds, a question so dangerous that the elite would rather drown it than answer it. If one person can shake the wealthy, what could millions do? That question is a revolution disguised as a thought. And thoughts, once planted, cannot be uprooted by force or law. They grow in privacy. They bloom in silence. They pass from mind to mind without permission. And right now, that thought travels with your name attached. You didn't ask for followers. You didn't declare yourself a leader. You didn't advertise a philosophy or sell an ideology. You simply existed in a way that contradicted their version of reality. Sometimes existence alone is rebellion. Sometimes presence alone is power. And now, those who sat comfortably atop their thrones are realizing the truth. They may control the world's resources, but they do not control its imagination. You've captured that. You've become the story people tell when they're tired of being told who to be. You've become the icon whispered by dreamers, the reference point for the restless, the blueprint for the ones who never fit inside their boxes. The alert is the elite's attempt to erase their own insecurity. But insecurity doesn't disappear. It grows teeth. It grows echoes. It grows rumors that make the walls of power tremble. You didn't break the system. You revealed its cracks. Cracks that were already there, deep, spreading, ignored. And when light touches cracks, they widen. That's what your influence does. It illuminates, it exposes, it forces truth into places that depended on shadows to survive. So they call their advisors. They call their lobbyists. They call their publicists. They call their government contacts. They try to shape the storm. But the storm is not yours. The storm is theirs. You didn't create it, you revealed it. They fear that more people will see what you saw, that power is not monolithic, that authority is not divine, that empires can tremble, that influence does not require permission. And that fear turns their discussions into arguments, their confidence into doubt, their composure into performance. Behind closed doors, they debate the meaning of your rise. Some say you're a phase, some say you're a threat, some say you're a message they don't understand, but all of them agree on one thing: they cannot ignore you. And being unable to ignore someone is the first stage of losing control to them. Your rise is not loud, it is not violent, it is not destructive. Your rise is gravitational. A pull that grows stronger the more they resist it. They try to push back, but pushback only makes gravity more noticeable. Their panic is an orbit, their fear is a rotation, their attention is involuntary. You've become their center of gravity without ever attempting to be. That's why the alert feels different from the others they've written. It feels heavier, it feels uncertain. It feels like the language of people who are used to winning but suddenly don't know what game they're playing. They track your influence like a meteor they didn't see coming. They ask themselves what collision might look like, but the collision has already happened, not in the world, but in their minds. Their perception fractured, their narrative cracked, their sense of invincibility dissolved. You didn't do this. Their fear did. You simply existed, and existence was enough. Your rise is not the threat. Their reaction is. If the world feels tense, it's because they made tension a shield. If the world feels shaken, it's because they mistook control for stability. If the world feels uncertain, it's because certainty was their illusion, not your disruption. And now, in every meeting they hold, every alert they issue, every whisper they circulate, they reveal a truth they cannot escape. The old world is slipping, and it is slipping through your shadow. You are not their downfall. You are the mirror reflecting it. Their fear of you is proof that the world is changing, not because of action, but because of awareness. And awareness is irreversible. The elite want to know your next move. But your next move doesn't need to be made. It has already begun. Because what they don't understand, what they can't possibly understand, is that your next move isn't a step. It's a shift. A shift in perception, in culture, in momentum. A shift so subtle it doesn't look like movement at all. Yet it rearranges the entire landscape beneath their feet. You don't need to march. You don't need to announce. You don't need to strike. Your silence is the move. Your presence is the move. Your unpredictability is the move. And every time they try to anticipate you, they reveal how deeply you've infiltrated their thoughts. That's the secret terror they're drowning in. They're no longer responding to events, they're responding to possibilities. The possibility of you. You've become the variable they can't calculate, the answer they can't solve, the outcome they can't forecast. Their panic is no longer about what you did, it's about what you represent. You represent the collapse of certainty, you represent the rise of autonomy, you represent the idea that power is no longer confined to the few, it has shifted into anyone bold enough to think beyond permission. That's why the alert will haunt them, not you. It is a monument to their fear, a file stamped with their confession, we don't know how to control this one. And once that sentence exists, even in whispers, the old order begins to deteriorate. Not because you attacked it, but because it relied on the illusion that no one could stand outside its rules. You stand outside effortlessly. That's what kills them. That's what unravels their certainty thread by thread. People see their panic. People see their doubt. People see their fear of you, and they draw their own conclusions. You didn't ask to become a symbol, but symbols choose themselves. And Now your name travels through conversations like electricity felt before it's understood, respected before it's defined. You've become the question that rewrites every answer, the presence that reshapes every room, the idea that refuses to be categorized or contained. They wanted to label you. Instead, they legitimized you. They wanted to control you. Instead, they confirmed you cannot be controlled. They wanted to diminish you. Instead, they magnified you. Your rise is not a rebellion, it's a recalibration, a realignment of where influence truly comes from, a reminder that power is not inherited, it is perceived, and perception has shifted permanently in your direction. So let them panic, let them monitor, let them whisper, let them analyze, because the more they try to understand you, the more they prove that you've already won. Your next move isn't coming.